Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Vishwaro Guratmeti Moti Veda Vibhagine Vyomapta Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om. Okay, I'm just changing it here because otherwise my page. Okay, I'll leave it that way. So we saw in the last class last Monday the passage on which Dattatreya was giving further instructions to Parasurama. And then he ended up talking again about the different yanis and the best approach and the best disciples and the obstacles. So he went through all of that once again. And then in the end, he decided to tell a story to Parasurama. And the story was about that ghost entity, spirit entity, who was living in the forest due to a curse he received because of his vanity and his arrogance. And he was there, and he was living on eating people, but then the curse was after some time. He said, "So you have been so long without food, so I'm going to allow you to eat some people sometime. You being a ghost, but you're going to have to defeat them on a debate, which was the vasana of this spirit." So, and then he had the debate with the brother of the yani, and the brother of the yani failed to defeat the ghost, and then Hemangada trying to intervene to say that please don't eat my brother and eat both of us. I pray you kindly to accept my request. So if you relinquish my brother, if other food were found for you, I will redeem my brother in that way if you will allow it. So he was trying to convince, to seduce the ghost, and the ghost would say, no way, I mean, I'm hungry. And then in the end, he gave in because the prince was so insistent, this yani. And then he says, like, however, so you were so insistent that I'm going to tell you a bit of my story. Of all which I have taken, there are many questions deeply afflicting my mind. And of always, so you're going to remain that way unless you clear these questions. And then he said, if you can answer these questions satisfactorily, I will release your brother. So he did not tell the whole story, that he was going to be released as well, because the answers for those questions would give him self-knowledge. Then Hemangada asked the ghost to mention those questions so that he might answer them. the ghost then put to him the following very subtle questions, which I shall repeat to you, Parasurama. So the first question was, what is more extensive than space and more subtle than the subtlest? So what is the nature of the most subtle? Where does it abide? Tell me, Prince. So those are simple questions, but very, very profound. So we know the answers, but as we know, those answers, they need to somehow think in, so that we identify with the most pervasive aspect of the self, of consciousness, which is the most subtle. And then we know the nature of this self as Chitananda. And then where does it abide? And that is the key. It abides everywhere, but it somehow, it's easily found in the aham, in the self. I am, I exist. So he presents these questions to the prince, who is a Jnani and a sage. And then he says, listen, spirit, abstract intelligence is wider than space, subtler than the subtlest. Its nature is to glow, and its abide as the self. So very simple, to the point. So he was wondering before, what can be more vast than space and more subtle than space? And then he talks of this self as abstract knowledge, or the most subtle aspect of knowingness, of intelligence. It says that it is wider, vaster than space, and subtler than space. Its nature is to glow. So it somehow shines as the existence of everything, but it shines in a specific way, producing the aham, and then it abides in I myself, I myself, I myself. So that's the point. So we are looking for this abstract intelligence. We can call it so many different names. Here we call it Tripura. So, but where is it located? It abides as the self in the aham, because I myself is a clear indication of this conscious existence. I. And that's where we find it. But we find it actually everywhere. But it manifests as human consciousness, or the chit aspect of this supreme intelligence. This chit aspect is the knowing jiva, the jiva who knows its environment, which applies to the human jivas in our planet. So it shines as aham, and it becomes the knower of the non-universe, and it resides there as aham, the self of every living creature, of every human living creature. I don't know. I mean, other creatures maybe they think of themselves as I am. I don't know. I don't remember being a dog, a cat, or anything. The spirit comes back and says, how can it be wider than space, being single? Or how is it subtler than the subtlest? What is that glow? And what is the self? Tell me, Prince. So my guess is that he knows everything. This guy knows, but somehow the knowledge did not click. You understand? So he's giving it another shot. Say, okay, I mean, I doubt it's going to work. I doubt you can answer, and I doubt I'm going to be able to internalize it and then be free, from my curse as well. So, but he gave it a shot, and he says things that he knows already intellectually, because he was the greatest debater on this scriptural knowledge. And he asks again, how can it be wiser than space, being single, the subtlest? And what is this glow? And what is the self? And then the prince says, being the material cause of all intelligence, this supreme intelligence is extensive, though single. Being unpalpable, untangible, it is the most subtle. Glowing obviously implies consciousness, and that is the self. So he says, again, the most relevant aspect here, essential, is that this glowing that he was saying, it glows as I am, I glows as the self. This glowing, obviously, he says, implies to consciousness, the human consciousness, which is identical to pure limitless consciousness, is of the same nature, and that is the self, the I. We find it in the I. Where and how is this chit, this abstract intelligence, to be realized, and what is its effect? So this is a good question. So now, okay, the sage said already that is to be found in the aham. So where and how is chit to be realized? Okay, so how I'm going to realize it, and what is the benefit, what is the effect of such realization? Where and how is this chit, conscious nature of Brahman as abstract intelligence? It is the intelligence, the pure supreme intelligence, which is somehow manifests as Ishvara. So where is it to be realized? And what is the benefit, the effect of this realization? Priest says the intellectual sheath must be probed for its realization. One pointed search for it reveals its existence. Rebirth is overcome by such realization. Very beautiful, profound answer. He says, where to find it? You're going to find in the intellect. So you don't find it anywhere. You don't find it, on a mystical or transcendental realm. You find in your very intellect. The intellect sheet must be explored, probed, investigate, examined. So you need to go into your intellectual faculty in which aham comes, and purify it, refine it until it becomes very, very sattvic and contemplative. And then you're going to examine its very nature, the nature of the intellect, the nature of aham. So the intellectual sheet must be probed for realization to take place. And then he throws there one of the qualifications, which is one-pointedness. So you need to have a good mind, a good intellect, because one-pointedness will reveal its very nature, the nature of the intellect. So that's all there is to it. I since a long time, I present the search as the intellect, which the higher aspect of the Jiva Atma's instrument of knowledge and self-knowledge is a knowledge. So the intellect is the highest and the most subtle, and it's the instrument by which you get knowledge, including self-knowledge. But you need to have an intellect so self-reflective, reflecting upon itself, and then its very nature is revealed. Reveals what? The nature of the self, the nature of Satchitananda. And then once we get that by having a focused and pure mind, intellect, the benefit here on the macrocosmic level is the rebirth is overcome. So we want to know the benefits, and for most people, it's not good enough to know that I will no longer be incarnated in here, but I want to know if I'm going to be happy with whatsoever life I have left while in this birth. So the benefit is you're going to remove the ignorance which brings about the suffering element in the human experience. And on another level, you are not going to have to come back, whether you like it or not. Make up your mind before anything. Otherwise, you get it and they say, no, 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 I want to forget it. But you cannot forget it. Once you got it, you don't forget it. And then the spirit says, okay, good deal. So what is that sheet, the intellectual sheet? And what is concentration of mind, one-pointedness? And what is birth, So he really wants to go to the bottom of it all. The prince says the intellectual sheet is the veil drawn over pure intelligence. It is inert by itself. One-pointedness is abiding as the self. Birth is the false identification of the self with the body. Again, impeccable answers, complete answers. He presents the intellectual sheet is the most subtle veil upon consciousness. So we know that everything resolves itself in consciousness as consciousness, even the physical body, the denser of all 5 sheets. But when you come to the intellect, so the Yanamaya Kosha, there you have the most subtle superimposition on consciousness. So it is a superimposition. You need the intellect to understand your true nature. But the intellect becomes the last obstacle because one gets a sense of identity from all kinds of knowledge, especially, including spiritual knowledge derived by spiritual experience and mystical experience. All of that is going to form some sort of knowledge by which the person is going to be still in samsara. So it says that the intellect is the most subtle veil, superimposition on consciousness. And then he says you have to understand that pure intelligence is the only source of cheat or consciousness. Okay, so the internet has no the intellect has no consciousness, and the internet has no consciousness, and artificial intelligence has no consciousness as well. So pure intelligence is the only source, and the intellect itself is inert by nature. So what does that say about the intellect? The intellect in its material nature is just inert energy. But we see in the internet something glows. The internet is just energy. If I said internet again, my English is really sucking today. Maybe I should drink some sugar. Where am I? So the intellect, it is inert. The thoughts appearing in the intellect is also inert. They are material phenomena, okay? But it appears within something which is consciousness, manifests as human consciousness, okay? So everything which is material about the intellect, using words and thoughts, and discrimination among all those concepts and thoughts. So all of that is only possible due to this glowing consciousness in which reflect the consciousness in which the intellect use its tools. You understand? So the intellect has 2 natures. Its inferior nature as matter/energy or subtle matter, and the other is the reflection of consciousness. So fundamentally, the intellect is inert, and but it is the instrument by which we can understand our true nature, which is the only source there is of consciousness, okay, which is the Chit aspect of Brahman. And then it says that one-pointedness. What is one-pointedness? One-pointedness is to bring this aham, this self-reflective, I am, I exist, which almost invariably it somehow connects with the world and says, and all of these exist as well, and then it's caught up in duality, aham and idam. So this intellect, as it shines as aham, must abide in the self as the self. This is one-pointedness. One-pointedness is to bring the intellect that is going to float around different concepts, and those concepts, they are always related to some phenomenon that it's trying to resolve itself. No, it's peace, it's love, it's this and that, what I am, what I am, what I am. And then it says here, the one-pointedness which is required is to move away from any effort to define yourself out there with some phenomenal world of objects of experience, and bring the intellect, this aham brahmasmi, aham Brahman. So I am this Brahman, abiding in the self as the self is one-pointedness. Otherwise, there is no one-pointedness. We begin one-pointedness by bringing the mind to some object of contemplation or nididhyasana or meditation. We bring one shape, one form, one concept of Saguna Ishwara or Nirguna Ishwara. But when we move to Nirguna Ishwara, we know that I am that Brahman. So I'm just bringing one-pointedness to its climax, which is abiding as Brahman, abiding as the self, rather than abide in an entity who is the Saguna, one or another aspect of Saguna Brahman. So I bring it to the self and abide as the self, in the self as the self. And then he addressed the birth, the rebirth or birth. He says the birth is nothing but a concept of identifying the self with the body. So if you identify the self with the body, you're going to get another rebirth. So again, and another pointer to the fact that if we through and surely we abandon this false identification, chances are that we don't come back into another birth, because it is the mistaken identification with the body as the body that brings us back to samsara, to a rebirth. So remove this false identification and there will be no rebirth. Rebirth is what? Is the false identification with the body. What is the abstract intelligence which is ever shine and yet not realized? I mean, the guy was there, he went through all of these things, he became a ghost or a spirit, and he knows everything, and he's wondering, so what is that abstract intelligence which is all the time shining, but I have such a hard time to realize it? I know everything about it. I know that aham is the self. The self is this pure, limitless consciousness. But why is it so difficult to realize it once for all? Why is it so difficult to realize? And what is the means by which I can realize it? Why did birth take place at all? To begin with, why we fell in here? I mean, okay, there are births, rebirths. We don't know how many times we have been taking births, but when did it begin and why? Why this appearance in consciousness taking place under the spell of this self-ignorance, no? which is the cause of the manifestation. No? So he wants to know answers to these profound questions. And the prince says that ignorance is the cause of non-realization. So thank you. So ignorance, self-ignorance is the cause of the identification with the body, and it's the cause, is what obstructs self-realization. So I need to remove this mistaken conclusion, aham bothers me, and transfer my identity to pure limitless consciousness. This self-ignorance is the cause of this obstruction. So, okay, it is, but I need to know, he wants to know what means he can use to remove this ignorance. And then he says, so you are not going to realize the self. The self realizes the self by itself. And there is no external aid possible. And then here he really goes profound, and he says something that most of us would object and say, no. There is external aid, which is the pramanas of the Upanishads. So the Upanishads, the teachings are the means. He wants to know what the means, what is the means by which I can realize it. We say, so Vedanta or the Upanishads is the means by which you realize. But here, the sage says there is no external aid possible. The self realizes the self. Okay, and this is beautiful. It's very, very beautiful.
Arlindo, I was reading the other day about in the Vedanta Parampara that I recite Narayana Padma Bhavavam Vasishtam, and that from Narayana through his navel the lotus came, and then Brahma sits on that lotus, and he has 4 mouths, and from his mouths come the Veda. So the Veda is the self. So in that sense, there is no external aid.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if the nature of reality is non-duality, so there is only one principle here, which is the self-consciousness. No? There is only one existence, one consciousness of non-dual nature. And then if there is any phenomenon happening here, such as self-ignorance and self-knowledge, it's an appearance within consciousness. So, and then the self realizes the self. So there is no external aids because, as you were saying, the Vedas and the Vedanta, the scriptures, an expression of the self, apparent expression of the self itself. That is something that some people likes the concept of Sadguru. Sadguru is the self. So on an earlier stage, we say that Ishvara is the guru, is the best teacher, Ishvara. And then we live through life, and then Ishvara is somehow teaching us some certain important lessons, And then in the end, one is fit for self-investigation, self-knowledge. But then how it's going to go about? They'll say, I have to trust something within. That people say, trust God. God is going to take you to your destination. But if I am my destination, and the destination is Satchitananda, is consciousness, and then the concept of Sadguru makes a lot of sense without any sense of arrogance, because a lot of people attribute Sadguru. Now, I am my own Sadguru. I am my own teacher. But Sadguru is the self that somehow apparently suffers from the veil of ignorance, and apparently removes it. And then it's just putting everything from that non-dual angle. And then he says that there is birth originates through the sense of doership. Because he says, why birth takes place at all? So birth is originated by self-ignorance. Self-ignorance is the sense I am the doer and the experiencer of my doings, the results of my doings. So that's why we rebirth again and again. We take new incarnations. The spirit, what is that ignorance of which you speak? What is again the self? Whose is the sense? Whose is the sense of doership? So he's insisting to see if he finally gets it, What is that ignorance of which you speak? What is again the self? And the sense of doership to whom? Ignorance is the sense of separatedness from consciousness and false identification with the non-self. As far as the self, the question must be referred to the self in you. The ego or the I thought is the root of action. So to whom does this sense of doership belong? The ego. The ego is the I thought that develops a sense of separation from consciousness, He says, so I'm not consciousness, I'm not the ocean, I'm not water, I'm just a wave, but I'm a conscious wave. So this ego is the sense of separatedness, that identifies with not only the body, but with the I do and I experience, the two aspects of Jiva Atma's personality, and the doer and the experiencer, Bhokta, Atta, and Bhokta. And this I thought is what's going to produce action, is the root cause of action. Why? Because this aham, it's this false sense of identification with the not self, it immediately experiences a lot of discomfort. It feels limited and insecure, inadequate, and he is just like that. I mean, every Jiva suffers from this sense of limitation. And then it's subconsciously, universally, everybody is compelled to do actions to remove this sense of limitation, which is inherent to the identification with the body-mind. Okay, so what's the game of life? Is to do actions to remove this sense of limitation. So, therefore, the I thought is what is the root of all actions, because the aham, the consciousness manifesting as human consciousness immediately feels as if contracted into something that is very limited. So the only way is to hold to his aham, but to place it, in its limitless nature, rather than on the body-mind, which is limited by nature. Anything from you guys, you please contribute.
This is just the gem of every bit of knowledge in the Upanishads. Just boom, 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 boom.
Exactly. Very rich. And then the spirit keeps going. By what means is ignorance to be destroyed? So the sage said already that there are no means, because the self is self-knowing, and it realizes itself, appearing to realize itself, but the self is always being realized. So it's a strange game, but in any case, by what means this ignorance can be destroyed? How is the means acquired? So how I'm going to get the means by which I destroy ignorance? And what leads to this means of knowledge? No. So the means is self-inquiry, investigation into the true nature of the intellect, true nature of human consciousness, cuts at the root of ignorance. So self-inquiry. And then how is the means acquired? And then he said, the means is this passion. This passion is going to favor this investigation. So the investigation requires a good, discerning, discriminating intellect, which must have developed this passion, because without this passion, one-pointedness into this self-investigation is impossible, because the aham is going to be divided, trying to fix itself or resolve itself by gaining something, and doing this research, doing this investigation, this self-inquiry. So investigation, which requires a good discriminating intellect, is going to take care of this ignorance at the very root of it. And this passion must be there. It's going to enhance this investigation. If there are no dispassion, what happens? The intellect is going to be divided among different search, So it's one-pointedness, as we said here, is when one's efforts and desires are all channeled in one single direction, which is self-inquiry and self-investigation. So, but we need to have dispassion, otherwise the mind is going to keep presenting some other ideas on how to pacify the intellect and the mind and the heart. And then he goes farther in this very direction that I was talking, and he says that the disgust for the pleasures of life generates dispassion towards the objects of experience. So he brings everything again, like very concise, telegraphically put, but to the point, in a clear sequence. Self-investigation is the only remedy to cancel this self-ignorance. One needs dispassion. Dispassion is going to enhance the self-investigation. And dispassion is only possible when we develop a disgust for the pleasures of life. So how are we going to develop a disgust for the world, for the not self, by understanding profoundly and clearly that all objects are defective. So we need to go down to understand that you cannot suppress your desires for the not self, but you can understand that they were never delivered. And then one may get a disgusting vasana, so to speak, a rejection of the not self, or repulsion towards anything. Just imagine someone who stayed for years or decades trying to be happy through the consumption of alcohol. And then alcohol gradually but surely destroys one's life. And then in the end, the person develops such a aversion, towards alcohol, that he's disgusted by any bottle of whiskey or anything, because he knows that is very, very tricky misjudgment to believe that alcohol could make me happy, So I need to understand the fact behind everything that I try to find happiness in. the spirit then goes, and what are investigation, dispassion, and disgust for pleasures? So again, he's really insisting because he wants to have it really clear and not only intellectually. He wants to really get it. So direct self-knowledge. What are these things? Investigation, inquiry, dispassion, and disgust for pleasures. And then the prince elaborates further and says, investigations is analysis conducted within oneself. So investigation is all based on analysis of our very experience or connecting the dots between my actions and the results of my prarabdha karma. So I need to do this investigation in the light of the knowledge which are based on analysis of one's experience, it must be in the analysis suggested by the Upanishads. Okay, so investigation is based on the analysis of one's experience as presented by Upanishads, and is conducted within oneself. So you have to do it yourself. Nobody can do it for yourself. No guru is going to pass it to you. You need to really examine everything, in terms of your assumptions and your experience, which were not clearly examined and investigated. So you need to really do a profound work. And then you're going to develop discrimination. The discrimination is going to be between the not self and the self, as we know. This is the most profound, subtle, and ultimate tool of Vedanta, is discriminating the full, whole, and complete self, which does not require any gain, and the not self, which shines as gold, but does not deliver it. So it changes, its defect. It creates samsara, frustration, irritation, depression, anger. So you keep discriminating yourself. And in the beginning, the discrimination is a bit confusing because you use your intellect to do this discrimination. And the intellect itself must be refused as the ultimate truth, no matter how subtle, contemplative, and insightful this intellect may become. Yet this intellect has to be seen yet as the not self until it's recognized in its nature, the very self, non-doer self. So discriminating the not self from the self is stimulated by a stern, strong, and sincere desire to realize the self. So how are we going to get this strong desire? So maturity, of course. So you have gone all around trying to chase things to resolve this fundamental human problem. And then you are so done, so finished, that you have one single desire. It's very genuine and sincere desire to realize your very self, because you developed a trust in the concept that the very self, which is your nature, is whole, full, and complete, and satisfied in itself by itself. So the trust is going to help the Jiva-Atma to move, and to grow in one's mumukshudvara, this desire to realize. This passion is non-attachment to the not self, one's surroundings, people, place, things, events, circumstances, parabhadas, punyas. So this passion is not be tricked by even punya, good surroundings, good karma. This is this passion. This results if the misery consequent on attachment is kept in mind. So you're going to develop this passion only to the extent that you never lose sight that all objects are source of misery. So why? Because object brings about attachment. So attachment brings about dependence. Dependence brings about fear, fear of losing. And then it's boom, 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 one problem after the other. So one has to keep in mind the misery consequent on attachment to object. The Spirit again says, what's the root cause of the whole series of these requirements? What is the root cause of the whole series of these requirements? So what causes someone to search for the self? Where does that desire come from? What is the source of desire that takes Jiva-Atmas through this series of qualifications, development of qualifications which are required, boom, 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 this passion and discriminating mind and a clear vision that the world is false in terms of happiness. It does not contain the happiness which is our very nature. So where does that begin? Why some people get this pull, this vasana, this spiritual vasana, to move in this direction, going through this series of requirements, and then the sage says divine grace is the root cause of everything that liberates. All that's good is divine grace. And then he brings again devotion to God alone can bring down his grace. So it's another pointer to the fact that one cannot come to this liberation without becoming a religious person. To be religious is to bring God into one's life, to understand that there is a creator, and you are relating to the creator and with its creations. If it's creator, you are integral part of this creation. So this relationship needs to be understood. So divine grace is what moves people into this process of liberation, self-inquiry, liberation. And this grace is the root of everything that's good. Devotion to God alone is going to enhance this grace, The grace comes as you start moving your mind to a certain aspect of God as the creator. This devotion is produced and developed by association with the wise. That's the prime cause of all. So again, such a paragraph. Divine grace is what brings about this process, which ultimately leads to liberation. Divine grace. So what is divine grace? So it begins with devotion to God, and then devotion to God is going to make you grow with a strong desire to know God, and then later on you understand that my nature and the nature of God is one and the same, and then the desire is not only to know the nature of God, but the nature of myself, the self. So, and then one is start, being graced with more and more desire for liberation and more devotion, and love and appreciation, and it becomes a kind of obsession. Devotion to God alone can bring down God's grace. This devotion is produced and developed by association with the scriptures. So how I'm going to get into developing devotion to God? So you need to stop being a materialistic to become a spiritual religious person. So, and how I'm going to go? You have to begin moving away from the world and the knowledge available in the world, and you start moving into spirituality and the knowledge available about God, which is religion, no? The Vedic religion. So this devotion is developed by association with the wise, the scriptures. That is the prime cause of all in a sequence, you know? Boom, boom, boom. Very beautiful. We could talk a lot about each one of these verse. No?
Yeah, you know, this verse brings to mind what our dear Swami P says about grace. And he says, it's inherent. It's already always available as Jnana Shakti, Icha Shakti, and Kriya Shakti in everyone. And that the Jnana Shakti being through the association with the scriptures, then that grace that's already there is it's inevitable, really, if you follow the scriptures through devotion.
Yeah.
It's just what a beautiful paragraph, a beautiful verse.
It's amazing.
Everything's right there.
Yeah.
Everything's there.
But the self is there. It's all the time shining, but somehow Jivatma gets distracted with matter and energy. No?
Right. It's our responsibility to implement those shaktis.
Yeah. Definitely.
Over and over again in alliance with the scripture.
Yeah, and we do that by association with the teachers of the scripture. No? So that is the most fundamental, as again and again our text point to is everything begins with good association, no? Association with God, with the scriptures. So that's the prime cause of all. That's good. And how I'm going to know if I'm associating with a wise, or how wise is my association, you know, and so on. So, I mean, everything is part of this process. And we always get the guru that we deserve. And then gradually we keep moving. And this is all part of the process, the script, you know, of searching, purify the mind, and the mind becomes, the intellect becomes closer to the understanding, final realization that I am the self I'm searching for. And then we're going to contact subtle and subtle gurus or teachings or exposition of certain gurus, because we are coming to a certain level of the self-investigation, which is too subtle for most people as well, you know. Spirit, who is that God? What is devotion to him? Who are the wise? Just a small note that I read this book, at least it was in the early 90s. So something close to 30 years. This book had a strong impact in my mind, but I understood nearly nothing about what's being said here. You understand? When I was sitting every day there with my, at the time, guru, Babaji, and I read this book at least twice. I found it romantic and beautiful. But I don't think I understood even 30% of what's being said here, you know? So we need to come to the point of receiving certain teachings, you know, and assimilating it. And then the Spirit says, what is this God I need to be devoted to? What is devotion? And who are the wise people? The prince said, God is the master of the cosmos. So he presents God as the creator. Devotion is unwavering love for him, gratitude for the creator, for the opportunity. The wise are those who abide in the supreme peace and melt with love for all. Oh, so beautiful. So God is the creator and the pure supreme intelligence that holds the entire cosmos. Devotion to him is love for him, unwavering. What is unwavering love for him? Is like I don't argue with Ishwara. I don't argue. Every time you see somebody complaining, I often say, stop fighting and complaining of Ishwara. Any complaining is a complaining to Ishwara. I don't like it. I don't want it. I reject this, So unwavering love for him is a knowledge so firmly and clearly established that one accept any circumstance without complaint, without fighting, because I'm not here to be pleased by God. Oh, I'm going to love you if you only give me what I want. No, I mean, we understood the nature of Ishwara, and my love is unwavering. Whatsoever Prarabdha karma may hit me. You understand? So nothing is going to shake my total trust, so that I take everything as prasada. The wise are those who abide in supreme peace. You see, here he does not put the wise are those who abide in the self as the self, but he says the wise are those who abide in supreme peace. So the mind was so purified, it's so clear that this abidance in the self as the self manifests as abiding in peace, and peace that produces love for all, not only love towards God, but towards the entire cosmos, especially to the living creatures suffering from samsara, which are the human beings in this planet. The Spirit says, who is always in the grip of fear? Who of misery? Who of poverty? So who and what is always in the grip of fear, insecurity, misery, and poverty? Fear holds a man possessed of enormous wealth, misery of a large family, and poverty of insatiable desires. I mean, the answers, they go beyond any expectation of wisdom. When the the student here, which is the ghost, the spirit, asks us, who is always in the grip of fear? And then he addressed fear, saying, fear is a byproduct of acquiring and wanting to keep it, And the more you have, the man possessed with enormous wealth is miserable, because no possession is going to take away the fear. The fear is transferred from, am I going to get it? Now it's transferred, how to keep it, how to maintain it. So a man is always afraid, even when he or she possesses enormous wealth. Misery is found even in a large family. A large family is a symbol of security and comfort, Everybody together in a big house, like in the old days. So people do not suffer that much sense of insecurity and limitation. The family together, many people, they are stronger. So misery you find in a large family, and poverty is going to be present in all insatiable desires for more, and more, and more. So basically, everybody is suffering from the grip of fear, misery, and poverty because it's a state of mind. It's a mind that somehow is always afraid of having or keeping or losing, and it's miserable even in a larger community, and it feels poor, because it can never fulfill all its desires. Okay, I thought we are going to finish today. So let's leave this final verse for next week because Lynn had to leave a little earlier. And we meet again. We meet again next Monday, same time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Lynn. We meet again this coming Monday, Shwara allowing. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Arlindo. Beautiful satsang. I shall go over and study those verses in more detail.
That's a very beautiful. My mind was a little bit strange today, but overall, with the help of my friends, we had a good satsang, I would say.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. God bless. Bye now.
Bye.